What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me as always are my three great co-hosts, Fede Perez, Maria Britos, and Ralph Hannah. And guys, we're coming straight off a really crazy Superclasico result, a result that obviously changed the entire landscape of the league. It's hard to believe that we thought maybe one team was going to run away with it, but the team that is in black and white decided to give a big blow in front of the home crowd over there, La Nueva Olla. This also black and white team is also trying to compete to stay in the Libertadores. They are in a really big battle against a really traditional Brazilian side that we spoke about last week as well. We're going to talk about if they have what it takes to qualify and reverse the result that they weren't able to get in Brazil, and also the national team. Obviously, despite Paraguay not making it to the World Cup that is happening in Qatar this year, we still have some qualifiers that are left to play. The game is Ecuador and Peru at the end of the month. Get some names that are in there as well. We'll talk about that. And I'm really excited, guys. I think I'm really excited about what to talk about first. So let's go straight ahead to the person that was at the Superclasico over there, La Nueva Olla, Fede Perez. I mean, boy, talk about a big result and a disappointing one for those that were there in attendance, at least those in red and blue.
Yeah, two more people here in this show. Also, just I see one smiling here in the camera. Hello, everybody. Nice to be back for another week here in Guarani Vision. We got so much to talk about. Obviously, the Superclásico. No unbeatables here in Paraguay. We talked about this last week. Cerro Porteño was the team to beat, and hey, it had to be their rival, right? Their special rival. It's always a special weekend here when we had the Superclásico. It was the only game on Sunday, so the whole attention, the whole country was on top of this game. Not happy about my prediction, though. I thought it was going to go one side. It was going to be a one-sided game, but it went for Olimpia. They really deserved it. We talked about this also, the different styles. I remember Ralph saying one team is going to have the ball, the other team is going to try to counterattack, and it was just like that. Olimpia, two counterattacking goals, and Alex Silva and Demis Gonzalez just shutting up the crowd. It was about 40,000 people present. A lot of people really were at the Cerro Porteño Stadium, and we have to talk about that. We have to talk about Libertad taking over the lead also with their win against Nacional on their last game that closed the round of the 6 week of matches. And we have another coach sacked, just as I mentioned. Nacional, Carlos Bonet just took over. It gets his first job as a coach, actually, taking over for Rodrigo Lopez that got sacked after losing very badly in Sudamericana and also losing at the local tournament. And now they have a new coach, and they lost badly 3-0 to Libertad, who are the new leaders because Cerro Porteño couldn't do it in front of their people. We got to talk about this. We got to talk about also the other teams that are in Sudamericana. We got to talk about this national team. Even though we're totally out of the World Cup, we got to talk about the future. We got to talk about the new players because I'm kind of excited to see a couple of new faces, and I hope they get some playing time, Roberto. It's nice to be here again.
It's nice to see you as well. And I think we can speak to one happy Olimpia fan here in this call is obviously Maria Britos, who, despite the kind of bad result that we saw midweek over there in Brazil, at least some sort of joy was given. And come on, it's always sweet to beat your classic rivals, but it's even more sweet to do it in front of their home fans. I mean, talk about really imposing your dominance and really putting in a big blow to this entire league. I mean, we spoke about how this Olimpia side, Maria, was, just slowly building up. We didn't know what to expect to them. We didn't know if this was still a team in transition or still a team that is there to compete. And even from what we saw midweek, even though they were able to score a goal over there, with that and the result that we got on the weekend, this side by Julio Cesar Cáceres is building to something interesting, don't you think?
It really is. It's definitely something that we didn't expect. They're flipping what they did last year. Their whole situation is completely different this season, and that's what it's about. And I think they really understood what the goal was this season. So along with everything that works together, the back office. The players getting paid, having a good so far Libertadores run. all that adds up to having a good concentrated group of players, like these kids, and getting the work done. That's how everything works together. Everything has to work together for a good result to come out, and this is what happened. And like I said in last episode, they just had to do it. They had to win this Clásico, because it's it's the rivalry, and it's, although they are probably more concentrated in the Libertadores, they needed to get this done, and they did, and we're very happy. Everyone was surprised, I think. We expected a little more of a tie, or a little more a game that we'll see more draws, but it ended up being the opposite, and I think that Olimpia fans are very happy about this.
And then going into, I guess, the other side to close it out here, Ralph, for the Cedro side, I mean, boy, I think many people were really speaking about a Cedro side that, was really a team that played off memory, a side that, it seemed like they had a good defense. It also seemed like they were able to get the goals done. But I think this result really put them back to earth. And also it really now gives them some sort of, I wouldn't say despair, but I definitely some questions asked to see how they can compete in the Libertadores, which for them starts in a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, that's right. Hi guys, hi everyone. Congrats, Maria, for Olimpia's win. It played out just as how we expected in a way in terms of the styles, but it was very surprising that Cerro Porteño couldn't score. They've scored in their last 13 games, so they always find a way. They've been also even building up from the end of last season was a lot of tight games, maybe scoring a single goal. This season, they've been running away with games. They've been averaging over 2 goals a game because they've won 3-2 twice. They've won 3-0, that kind of thing. So that was a big surprise that they weren't able to do it against an Olimpia defense that has conceded a lot of goals. But Olimpia were excellent from Tito Torres was really good. He had a terrible game against Fluminense. He was pretty much at fault for all 3 goals, but he responded with a great game here. Zarate, the very young centre-back, was filling in for Alcaraz. He did so well too, just closing the spaces, because Cerro attacks a lot. They attacked a lot, but they just couldn't find that final pass, or that cross into the box was being cut out. And then the other end was the exact opposite. Pretty much the first major attack by Olimpia ended in a goal, and it's between Riveros and Duarte. They didn't get it right. Like, Riveros had to go and close down. He didn't get there in time. Duarte lets Silva come in front of him, and suddenly they were losing. So their whole game plan as well is almost thrown out the window in 9 minutes because that goes so early. So yeah, it was a surprising result considering the form, but we talked about it last week. We said, right, form goes out the window in these big games, these Superclásicos, because they're almost like one-off events. So yeah, great by Olimpia, and it makes the league so exciting now because Libertad have gone top. All of a sudden you're like, wow, Libertad are actually looking very good. Talking about going into the Libertadores, they start their campaign in 2 weeks too. And they have all those young players, but then yesterday was all the old guys. It was 38, 39 and 40-year-olds that got the 3 goals. So, I mean, there's so much depth over there in Libertad. So we're looking, I think, to an interesting title race. And then also the Libertadores, I think you have 2. I still think Cerro are a strong team. So they've been put in pot 1 for the draw. So they also avoid some of the bigger Brazilian teams and that kind of thing. So still definitely lots of hope for them. But yeah, Chiquiasa's got a bit of work to do, I think, with that well-oiled machine that didn't quite function at the weekend.
Absolutely. And, looking at the table real quick, it is a 5-point gap between first and fourth. Obviously, Libertad, Cerro, Resistencia are still unbeaten at the moment. They do have to play Olimpia and Cerro in their next few games. So definitely games where they could really change the way that the whole league gets set up and closes it out for one team. So definitely going to be interesting to see how this goes. But obviously, let's talk about what we saw over there at La Nueva Olla in front of a packed crowd over there in the Estadio General Pablo Rojas. Olimpia getting those 2 goals, an early goal, firstly from Alejandro Silva in the 9th minute before Delis Gonzalez closing it out in the 90th minute as well. So a big result for Olimpia. Morale is obviously very much risen for this side Fede, you were there at the stadium. You were calling the game for Rock and Pop. Obviously, it's been a result that I think Olimpia needed. I think certainly a team that is starting to have an identity. You know, we see the likes of, you know, like you had mentioned, Ralph, you know, players like Zarate and Salcedo, you know, the young center backs that were able to hold off really the goal scorer of the competition so far in Morales, and, you know, the main, I guess, signing that they got in Marcelo Martins Moreno. And, you know, the fact that it's also beating Jean, you know, the goalkeeper that really has had a good record. In fact, you know, had a good clean sheet record ever since he joined Cerro Porteño. So everything is really to blame, I guess, for Chiquiarce. I mean, what do you feel now heading into this game, that how Cerro can indeed bounce back to really restore morale and get themselves back into this fight for the league title?
Yeah, you know, I would put this more on the players, actually, just because I think Cerro Porteño went out just to do what they usually do, you know, but the players didn't do that. I mean, they didn't execute the game plan. They didn't pressure the team that they had in front of them. It was actually Olimpia, just as the first ball was touched, you could just see that Olimpia was just head on. They were really concentrated. They were going to put pressure on Cerro Porteño. They were going to let them play easily. And Cerro Porteño was missing a couple of players. I mean, Juan Patiño is very important back there. Riveros didn't have a good game, and this was his debut also. You mentioned a couple of players in Olimpia that also were playing their first Superclasico, but it was a chance for them to show themselves. And Riveros had done a well job, but Cerro had problems in the backfield already in the game before this one when Patiño left the team. You know, they don't have a solution for everything apparently, and I think they really struggled there. And then you had Olimpia also winning the midfield. That was really a shocker to me, to see Hugo Quintana, Marcos Gomez, really young players pressuring, winning practically every ball against quality players like Pica Lucena, who is a national team player, and Carrascal, an international player. He's a Colombian player. You know, they've been killing it in these first games, and they were really getting beat to every ball pretty much. And they're pretty much the brain of the team. You know, if they don't work out, Cerro Porteño has problems. And if they can't get their backs to the sides all the way to the top of the field, they really have, they didn't have much. You know, they needed something else from Aquino, from their star player, besides the Bolivian that you mentioned, Moreno Martins, who after 4 games still is yet to score. And their most important player, Aquino, he had the best opportunity in that first half to put the game 1-1 to even the game. So I want to go by parts here. You know, I want to talk a little bit more about that first half, and I want to hear the rest of you guys. But, you know, in that first half, I thought it could have been a tie, but Olimpia passed by it. And, you know, with that 1-0, the pressure was really on Cerro Porteño. They didn't handle the atmosphere right. They didn't solve their problems in the second half, not even with the players coming in, that I thought really came in late. But that first half, I think everybody was surprised by what Olimpia showed.
Yeah, I agree. I think the real surprise is even the first goal. But what Olimpia did so well is they're very direct. So it's quite simple football. I mean, Quintana and Gomez, who are the two in central midfield that Fede was mentioning that won that battle, they're kind of both players that are there to like break up the game and break up play, but they're not really going to start doing lots of like creative movement passes, that kind of thing. They're just gonna try and win the ball and get it forward. And on that first goal, when you look at someone like Ivan Torres has made that run into the box. He's the left back. He's found himself into the penalty area. Ale Silva's playing on the wing, but he's got into almost like the striker position to score the goal, to tap the ball in. So Olimpia obviously had that plan from the start that we'll play very direct, but and we're going to play counterattack. But that means when we do really counterattack, we go for it. We actually will commit players into the box and overlap, and do that from the very beginning. And maybe Cerro didn't expect that. I don't know, maybe because maybe they were thinking, you know, what's Ivan Torres doing at this position? And Riveros was the person that goes to close him, who's a central defender. So the centre backs may be thinking, why am I closing down the opposition left back, you know? But that works. It was that early overload. And then what they did once they had that goal, Fede mentions that they close spaces really well, Olimpia. So there is the Aquino chance. but ultimately in the whole game, Cerro only have 2 shots on target. I mean, they did really well closing spaces. And we saw that with Aquino particularly. If you remember, I think most of the first half of last year, he really struggled. For whatever reason, he wasn't playing very well. Then towards the end of the year, he came into his own and he was pretty much one of the best players and helped Cerro to the league title because he was always in the space. He was always making things happen. But they closed him down very well. And then the Moreno Martin situation is he's still learning. He's still in his first few games. There's one moment, maybe this is second half now, but there's a moment with Robert Morales when he doesn't quite connect or pass because they're not on the same wavelength yet. So there was a few little kinks that Cerro needed to make, but Olimpia weren't going to give them any chances there. So yeah, I think that was Olimpia was like very direct counterattack, but committing players and then really good at closing the spaces. And Cerro didn't have an answer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, no, just piggybacking on what you guys said, you can see that Olimpia was very organized, and the first goal, you could see that they had been, that they knew what they were going to do, practicing. I think it was like 3 or 4 touches and then, it came the goal. So it was definitely more concentration from Olimpia.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's obviously a result that obviously is boosting morale for Olimpia, that, it allows them to really get into this race. I think this was a side that I think needed to get a result like this. I think, and primarily as well, I mean, this is an Olimpia side that has gotten Cerro Porteño's number in the last few games. They did it in the Supercopa, and now they're doing it over there at La Nueva Olla. So obviously, this is a side that is fearless. This is a side that I think the President Cardona is really trying to invest in a side that is still keeping to its roots and trying to forget of the issues that had really hindered them over the last year or so. So I think this is something that they need to build onto, and moving into that, heading into now speaking about the Libertadores. Obviously, the game that we are talking about is the one that they played in the final qualifying round that will determine if they can go into the group stage. They took on Fluminense over there in Rio de Janeiro. And initially, it was actually going well. Despite Fluminense scoring early from Germán Cano in the 11th minute, Derlis Gonzalez took advantage of a mistake that allowed them to equalize, which would have been a great result. They actually went to halftime with a 1-1 draw. And, it could have been a great result moving forward, but Fluminense ended up scoring twice with Luis Enrique in the 47th minute and then Cano again in the 68th minute. So, Ralph, I want to go to you on this one because I think, it's one of those things, man. It's like Olimpia have always been a side that have traditionally have always come back from 3-1 downs or 2-goal deficits, 1-goal deficits, especially now playing at home at the Defensor del Chaco, which I'd imagine is going to be a packed house at this time of recording tomorrow. So, how confident are you with this Olympia? Exactly, yeah, and rightly so. It needs to be sold out. I think for a game like this where everything is on the line, Libertadores, those special nights that we've always known Olimpia for so many years, do you think that we might see one as well tomorrow in Sajonia?
It's a really difficult proposition because Fluminense were very clever. So in the first half, I was looking at this afterwards. In the first half, Fluminense kind of had more of the ball and were taking the game to Olimpia and like how you would expect Olimpia to play. In the second half, with it at 1-0, actually Fluminense started giving up some of the possession to Olimpia and saying to Olimpia, okay, you come on, show us what you can do, which is exactly the opposite of Olympia's game plan. So if you look, it's really interesting in the second half, I just have it here, Olimpia had 62% possession and Fluminense only had 38%. But Fluminense were doing really well on the counterattack. They generated more chances, more shots. And of course, they scored the 2 goals. So going into this game, thinking about how Abel Braga set that up there for his Fluminense side, he's obviously seen that, thought about, maybe I can take some of the sting out of Olympia's threat by letting them have the ball and saying, you come on to us. And he can do that with a 2-goal lead. So that makes it very complicated, I think, for Julio César Cáceres to think of his game plan. His game plan was perfect against Cerro because he knew Cerro would have the ball, and we just talked about that very direct counter-attack. But that's probably not going to work for him tomorrow. So it is tomorrow at the time of recording. So I'm thinking like how he sets up, who he will play. For sure, Delis Gonzalez is going to start. I think for sure Richard Ortiz is playing because Richard Ortiz only came on as a sub. He'll have Alcaraz in defense, that kind of thing. But I wonder if he tries to do something a little bit different with the midfield to counteract what looks like Fluminense are going to come and play with a low block and then try and play counter because he needs to do something a little bit different, I think, to generate the 2 goals.
They scored early against Cerro Porteño. If they do that against Fluminense, I think that could be key, right? Just to try to handle the match a little bit better. Just because, 2 goals, it sounds like a lot before the game, but, you score 1 and you get that push into trying to get the second one. That's how easy it is sometimes in these Libertadores matches. We see it all the time in these games. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get that first goal in the first half and you have the stadium after you, that they can actually pull it off. But it's not going to be easy to stop this Brazilian team, especially Luis Enrique, which I think was the most talented player. And he was unstoppable for Tito Torres, really. And also for Fernando Cardoso, who played on the left side. He was a real threat, especially just starting in that second half when he scored the fabulous goal. Apparently, he's going to be available because Tito Torres got a yellow card in that game for hitting him pretty hard. I think he was kind of frustrated after seeing Luis Enrique take over so many games in front of him. I'm hoping, and because of that yellow card, Tito Torres is not going to be able to play. So you're going to have to put in there probably Mateo Gamarra, who is another left back. He's pretty young. We'll see how he does because the times that he's played in the local league, he hasn't done that well. He looks more like a center back than a left back. Especially for a big team where you need a player to be solid in defense and also going forward, right? Which is something that Tito Torres is pretty good at. He's going to miss him there, but Fernando Cardoso is in a great level. I'm hoping that he has a big game again. Derlis Gonzalez, he's scoring 2 games in a row. He's scoring now. I mean, look out for him. This is a very important player. If he's in a good moment, they can take advantage of that. Alex Silva also scored in the Superclasico. They kind of rested him in the second half. I think he's going to be great. And Recalde also rested. He hasn't played the last 2 local league games, and he's pretty well rested also for this very important game. There's so much money on stake for Olimpia. I think they're going to leave it all out there, and they have everything for them, especially people behind them. I mean, they just gonna have to put at least a goal up there just to put the pressure on Fluminense. I don't think Fluminense is all that, but they do have a couple of players that you're gonna have to take special care of.
And Maria, I want to go to you on this one because just in case that Olimpia do not qualify for the next round, they still have a chance at something in a South American competition. They will go to the Sudamericana, which, again, we had mentioned this last week as well. We still have a lot of difficult sides there, a lot of Brazilian sides and a lot of Argentinian sides that are competitive. But I think it eases off, or maybe even just increases the pressure for Olimpia as well. This is a competition that they've never won before either. Olimpia have won all the Libertadores. They've won all the other titles that are out there. They've never won this one. They've never won this competition before. So perhaps it's more added pressure for this team if they were to go out and compete in the Sudamericana.
I wouldn't say I guess every competition there is pressure, but whether they would like to win it, I'm sure they do. Who doesn't want to, win a big competition like this? Whatever, either Libertadores or Sudamericana, it's already big, in South America. And so just getting there in itself, I think it's a big step. The fact that they have a chance to continue competing internationally, it's one of the good things that they can accomplish already. So whether they do lose or not, I think they should be very proud because they are getting good results. And I think, I think last time I said that they maybe don't have that big of a chance, but seeing how they have evolved lately, I really think that they can go a little further. I just think that they need to continue pushing hard, being a little more concentrated in their game plan. I was going to mention earlier that this last game against Fluminense, I saw them a little bit too sloppy. They were doing a lot of fouls, which resulted in that yellow card, which is very dangerous in this situation because you can lose your very important players. But considering everything and how they're doing, I really think that they could continue going forward. And even if they do Sudamericana, it'll probably be even further.
They have one good news ahead of this game, which is the return of Guillermo Paiva. He's probably not going to start this game, but he only got 1 game suspension, so he's available for Julio Cáceres for this game against Fluminense. He's like a super sub lady, Roberto. I mean, he's scored 4 goals so far, and most of these goals have come from him coming off the bench, so he could be very important, and Olimpia needs to score at least 2 goals on this match.
Absolutely. And obviously the big advantage for them as well, that there's no away goals. So certainly it doesn't change anything from a mathematical standpoint. The fact of the matter is that Olimpia still have to score more than 2 goals, at least to push into penalties. If they can get more, then obviously that would give them as the winners. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this Olimpia side reacts. I think everyone has to really look at this side, that they have to go in early, they have to go in and try to, get the goal that they need and then go off from there. I mean, that's certainly something that, if La Mística, this kind of mystic feeling that Olimpia have had in these type of nights before, let's see if there is another magical night in Olimpia as well, because if they're able to do this, then, oh man, I mean, it's almost as if now there's something really special. I mean, looking at what they did in the Superclasico and now getting a result like this, yeah, I think now it's time to be really serious about an Olimpia side. And now switching gears to something that I think, is not as serious because of the competition that we're competing for, that they are currently out. It is the national team. We have to mention them because they are still due to play 2 more qualifiers to close off the World Cup, obviously against 2 sides that technically are not in the World Cup yet. Ecuador are 99% in. They're about to go in there. But they do play Peru, a side that still needs to compete for the last spots. They take on Uruguay at the Centenario before hosting Paraguay over there in Lima, a team that they've always beaten. They've never lost to Paraguay in World Cup qualifying. But looking at some of the names, Fede, I'll go to you on this one, because you see some of the more typical names. I mean, you see some of these guys that have been through the entire process. We were hoping that maybe because of these games that are happening and that basically they're out of the World Cup, that maybe we would see some new names, but most of the same suspects actually. But I think one of the good things that we've seen, we see a few new names, 3 names actually that are new that we haven't seen in quite some time. Gladito Fernandez, if you remember, was the goalkeeper at the start of the qualifiers before having to deal with an injury, and that left him out for the entire process before Anthony Silva came in and became the player behind the sticks. We also see the return of Jesus Medina, someone who's actually playing pretty well over there in CSKA Moscow ever since moving from NYCFC. And a new kid, 20-year-old Matias Galarza from Vasco da Gama, a player that actually was very tied to the Bolivian national team due to his parents, but he decided to play for the team of his roots, where he was born. He came up from the Olimpia system, actually never played for Olimpia before moving to Vasco da Gama. He actually made his first team debut at Vasco da Gama in Brazil. So definitely a wild card situation for Guillermo Barros Schelotto. But ultimately, I think this is a side that heading into these games, you're going to have to test out these new players. And obviously Galarza, Medina, and looking at some of the other young players that are there, like Jose Florentin over there at Vélez, who's done well at Guarani, Sebastián Ferreira, who's actually playing over there at Houston Dynamo. This is Blas Viveros, obviously, a young player over there at Bromby. We've heard of him as well. So I think this is a side that you're just basically testing out new players for the new process.
I hope that he does test out new players. I hope that he gives a game time to players that we haven't seen so far. I hope at least Anthony Silva leaves the goalkeeper position, and we see Angel Gonzalez or Robert Junior Fernandez again, like you mentioned him. In defense, I don't see that many new names. Hopefully, we'll see some from the local league. We still have to see the list from the local league just to see how many players he takes. On defense, we could have a couple of players coming in from Cerro Porteño, from Guarani. Roberto Fernandez was called up last time around. He had COVID and couldn't play against Uruguay. Hopefully, I do see a couple of those names. There are names that a lot of people didn't want to see this time around that just didn't hold up to their expectations. Gustavo Gomez, he was one of our captains, but a lot of people don't want to see him in the national team. Didn't want to see him for at least these 2 games. We're not playing for anything really. The other teams are going to play for something, especially Peru. I've been watching a lot of Peruvian media lately, and they're really putting on the pressure on their team to beat us on that last game, just because no matter what happens against Uruguay, they really need that win against us. So we're gonna have very competitive teams going up against us. Ecuador has looked really well ever since their coach took over, and our coach needs to show something also, Roberto. We talked about it on the last episode. There's going to be a big change in the FA. We're going to have a new president soon by the end of the year, and you don't know if that could also mean a change in the head coach position in the national team. So Schelotto has to kind of show his ground. He has to kind of defend himself now with his work, with his team, and kind of show something. I mean, this team is like by the floor last time I saw it around against Uruguay, especially. It showed no spirit. It showed no football whatsoever. We've been one of the teams that has less attack in the qualifiers, and we just need to show something, at least new players, at least new opportunities. Matias Galarza, that sounds like interesting. Let's see him. We haven't seen him much in Vasco da Gama. I mean, not at least in the highlights, making it big yet, but he is a new name for the national team, and I think he was also being followed by the Bolivian national team. So it's good to have him on board. Angel Romero is back, who is also getting game time in Cruz Azul. But all these guys are going to be around by the next World Cup? That's my big question. I mean, this list should have been thinking about trying to get to the next World Cup, not just finishing the job, which is what I think Schelotto was thinking about when he called all these players out.
Yeah, it's not like a particularly revolutionary list. I mean, Galarza is the one player we're talking about, and it does sound they're trying to just reserve him because his father was born in Bolivia. He's born in Asunción, but his father was born in La Paz. So because of that, there's a possibility he plays for Bolivia. But this way, if he comes on, then he's pretty much like saved for Paraguay. And then if he does develop and become more of a regular starter for Vasco or in the Brazilian league, then we have him on our side. He's only 20 years old. I mean, Blas Riveros is interesting because Blas Riveros is there, but if I'm right, Arzamendia isn't. So Arzamendia is one player who we've seen who's playing in Europe on the left-hand side, and now he's replaced by Riveros, who a lot of people like, but the thing about Riveros is he's been injured for a long time, so we'll have to see how he comes back. He's also a very attacking fullback, so how will he do with if he has to cover and defend? Let's see. I mean, we haven't got anything to lose, so maybe it is to go a bit more attacking. And then, well, maybe it's interesting. There's no Tony Sanabria, there's no Carlos Gonzalez, so there's no Dario Lescano, but he kind of dropped out of the process. But looking at the strikers, then really there seems to be a lot of possibilities for the youngsters in Paraguay. So you're talking about Julio Enciso and Robert Morales, who are the two that will be expecting that call up. And then maybe somebody like Tito Villalba is playing very well, so maybe he's going to come in from the local team. There's plenty from the local league, sorry. There's plenty of space there for some local based players, because only 19 only 19 have been reserved from abroad, where I think usually they were doing 24, 25. So there is going to be a bit more of a home focus, I think, with this. But yeah, let's see. There aren't a huge amount of names out there in in the foreign leagues at the moment. That's one of the big problems with Paraguayan football, right? That they haven't been exporting talent to the top leagues. So there weren't a huge amount of other players we could have expected, I think, to come in here.
I think besides, the players and the fact that they are considering using more younger players, I really think that now the federation is looking at the fact that they are not gonna qualify, so they're kind of just doing things a little different. And by this I mean, because I saw that they changed the venue of the game with Ecuador. I don't know if maybe Fede has more insider information.
Ciudad del Este.
Right,
for the first time ever.
And that's, yeah, exactly. It's very odd. So I think that, to me, that shows that Paraguay, the federation, it's just kind of going with the flow with this and just taking different approaches, maybe testing things out, and just moving on to the next chapter. So hopefully, they do have the younger players more exposed out there, and that starts another evolution, another revolution of a different kind of national team.
I want to be a little harsh on this, and I want to ask all of you guys, because I know personally all of you guys had expectations on this squad, and especially on certain players. I would like to hear from you guys. What are your top 3 players that really let you down in this process? Because I really have mine. I think Gustavo Gomez was a complete failure in the national team. I also believe, in that midfield, we can say the same thing against Miguel Almiron. I mean, he didn't contribute enough. We were expecting so much from him. And then we could say the same thing about pretty much all the strikers, because we really never had a center forward. And the only one that really stood out over there was Angel Romero. The rest of them really let me down. I mean, there's not much to clap. I mean, Maria just said it. They're taking this game to Ciudad del Este. Trust me, nobody in Alto Paraná, nobody in Ciudad del Este is happy that they're getting this match. Nobody's really thrilled to watch this team, because this team has showed them so little lately.
I mean, I echo your thoughts on Gomez and Almiron are maybe the two ones that you feel have let down the most. Gomez, because he plays so well for Palmeiras, and he's doing so well, and he's performing so well. So you just want to see that transferred over. And this always happens with lots of players. I mean, Taquara always suffered with that. While he was like going to UEFA Europa League final with Benfica and stuff, he couldn't score much for Paraguay. That was always a thing. In England, we had Andy Cole, who won the treble with Man United, Champions League, all that stuff, never could score for England. So there's some players that's like, and Gomez used to be in that category for whatever reason. Almiron's a sad case, because Almiron, as his trajectory has gone down with Paraguay, is going down with Newcastle. He started at the weekend, which was good, but that's like been a rare appearance for him since Eddie Howe took over at Newcastle. So he's struggling there to hold even his position in the Premier League. And then the one that lets me down as well is Gaston Jimenez, because at the weekend I was watching MLS and I see Gaston Jimenez in Chicago Fire. He's actually setting up a goal with a header, and I'm like, where was this guy? He was never doing this in the national team. Well, there's one game against Venezuela I saw him get in the box, but that was a player that I thought, looking at the quality we've seen in MLS, but also when he was in Argentina, I could have hoped for a bit more. So those are probably my 3, I think.
I'm gonna piggyback on what you guys said about Gustavo Gomez and Miguel Almiron. Pretty much the same thing. It's really sad how Almiron just has gone down in his quality of as a player. And the third one, I guess, I'm gonna go with the one that I always had an eye on, and I think that was it's not what you guys think, but it's Cecilio. And I really thought that he was gonna do something different. I thought he was gonna follow a little bit on Miggy's steps, make it big in the MLS. He's doing well, but not as big as we expected. But I don't know, guys. It's really just, it's such a weird thing how Paraguay has handled everything, and it is disappointing, but we can only hope for another better another better season, when the next World
And,
Cup comes.
and obviously we'll go in depth to, and I agree with you guys. I think Almiron and Gomez, two players that are kind of really the star, have to be the star players of this side, did not show up when needed to be for the national team. The same could be said for the likes of Junior Alonso. The same could be said for players like Santiago Zarmendia, very criticized during this entire process. I mean, yeah, the list goes on and on, really. It's, Yves Sanabria, a player that's playing week in and week out at Torino in Serie A, did not do anything there. There's a lot of names that you could really mention, and you can only really cut the exception to maybe a few, if anyone. Probably one hand, I could probably count how many of those players that have kind of even impressed. And then you got the young players, the guys that are over the under age of 25, right in that kind of range. And those are the ones that you really have to hope up for. And, you got one player in the local league that is the jewel basically in Julio Enciso, and you got another one like Jorge Morales. Paiva is another one. So you still got some young players that are coming up on the national team. In the local league, but can they do that for the national team? We don't know, and we hope that when Guillermo Barros Schelotto announces the players that are on the local side, that those players that have been impressing so far can indeed show up in these games. So yeah, we'll obviously go into depth in a couple of weeks when we have to talk about what really went wrong with this national team and why they failed to qualify for Qatar 2022. So very interested about that. But again, another great show. Congrats again to Olimpia for winning the Superclasico. Let's see if they can double down and beat Fluminense to qualify to the next stage of the Copa Libertadores. Also, special shout out to General Caballero, who actually qualified to the next round of the Sudamericana side that was actually recently promoted from the second division to the first division, is now playing in the group stages of the Sudamericana. So really impressed for them. And again, another great show as always. So for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, Maria Britos, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.